Hello everyone. Today's talk will be called Kindness of Invisible Hands. So the kindness of invisible hands. And what I would like to really talk about is that there are moments in reality when if you wear glasses, your glasses are taken off and life is blurry. And you wonder what's going to happen next as you progress through your unknown, and you see there's a sense of continuation and faith that just carries you through. So in other words, your faith, your trust, your sense of intuition, your sense of knowing, your sense of clarity, all these are things that have been part of the crevice of your hope. They have kept it open. In other words, a greater, more harmonious reality such as heaven has been open to the minds of men when they have confronted hell. So similarly, the hope of heaven is an image based of an intuitive knowing within you that you are safe. And this sense of safe is actually that you are present, not that you're safe physically. In other words, physical reality is that game which you need to be aware of, that you're first put in to be a player, but you're not really a player of that game. You really don't need to play that game. So what that means is that you understand more than your idea, your engagement in life. And so you become an existential sense of self-awareness that is more dynamic in knowing. And so when you're dynamic in knowing, it really means that your mind is not working as in thinking. So it's not a thought thinking. You're in a sense a present moment aware. And so you're just everywhere. So space and time do not have to be, in your experience, kept in one sense of continuum. You can navigate with it, you can fluctuate with it, and what you think is conscious is actually, you must have more trust in your subconscious to see that you are walking in grander ways. That is how you're kept. And so you're kept by invisible hands, or the kindness of invisible hands is actually that you are placed into this reality and so you are functioning. So life is actually present through the kindness of invisible hands that have kept it. And that means that your face of gratefulness for the knowing of your hope, or where your hope leads, or where the light at the end of the tunnel is, you're knowing for, in a sense, your greater truth. You must acknowledge this, and you must in an instant say that I, with my most clear and compassionate sense of sincerity, am now ready to walk into my greater vision. And you will see that your simple, honest, in a sense, longing will, in a sense, open your eyes to how you are, in a sense, placed in this reality. Now, the kindness of invisible hands is a collective sense of occurrence and happening and knowing. So the way you're aware of it is not individual, so we cannot talk about it. But man also has individual ways where his individuation is being and learning about collectivity from his greater individual aspects. And so what that means is the leaf is learning from its roots. You will find that thought is at first formed, and the minute you're aware of where the form's coming from, in other words, you go search it, you're instantaneously found within your present. And as you're found in your present, you see that there's a very huge difference between curiosity and longing. And so this has been a confusion for many people, which I want to clear up. Curiosity is when you're looking for something, but you really don't know what you're looking for. So in other words, you have an intention to be in a different state, but you don't have an intention to be in what kind of different state. And so when you don't have an intention of what form to be, but just want to be in a different form, your environment will, in a sense, present intentions which you will feel, in a sense, are out of your control because you're allowing it that way. And it's not something that you're allowing, it's not like an on and off switch. It's simply how you feel about it. How do you feel about how you're present here? Because I'm pretty sure you exist and you're alive. And so because you're alive, there's an aspect that is profound about how you're here. beyond language, beyond science, beyond the concept of spirituality. In other words, when you see how you are alive, and there's a very unknown value to that, you see there comes this sense of wanting to know more, but in a humble way, because you see that seeking external manifestation and trying to, for example, becoming that billionaire is not fulfilling your life, because your design of life is not calculated by your physical accumulation. It is in a sense considered by how you are experiencing a totality. So the range of experiences you go. So a being knows that, okay, the game is not quickly run in there and, become popular and make a lot of money and just feel like you feel good, The game is actually being aware that every moment is simply you are stepping into a room with an infinite ceiling. In other words, you're looking at the limitless with every limitation that you are conceived in. So when you become an acknowledger of moment, you do not just get a confrontational ability beyond your physical form, but you get a sense of knowing that can acknowledge any fluctuation. So it does not matter if you're seeing, for example, a birth or a death. It becomes a sense of knowing that transition is transition, regardless of your interpretation, from an individual point which is changing. And so it is okay for man to laugh, because that is how his connections are. Because some people think it has to be in such a very, profound and hidden and secret and mystical way. Actually, no, it's simple. The modern mystics are those people who, in a sense, see the simple things and in a sense are aware of their complex presence. And vice versa as well, because you will see that once you become aware of the nature of your eyes, ideas can no longer keep you where you know yourself you're not. And so there comes the moment where perhaps in many great leaders, regardless of their agenda, it has happened where a man has recognized the power and intensity in his idea, in his greatest idea, and found that his greatest idea can only be found through his action. So what that means is that you want to, for example, go into a very great state of being, you have that vision, but you're not acting on it. And if you don't act, well, you cannot carry anything if you do not choose to get involved. So what that means is that if I do not want to, for example, have the ability, or let me rephrase it like this. You must be willing to play the game once you know you're in a game. And this willingness does not come from the limitations of the player, but the probability and the infinite potential of where the game can lead with the inspiration of man. And so this sense of longing that comes within you begins showing that because you as a being, as a conception, have an ability to conceive the most compassionate, most gracious being. In other words, the way you receive from your dimension before the form dissolves is you take your archetypes and greatest symbols and connect it to the edges of your reality. So what that means is that your reality then becomes based on the most simplest thing, because that is how you're placing it. And so as many lenses are put within your eyes can always close and turn and shift. And what that means is that regardless of what man thinks he's limited to, there are suddenly random, chaotic, and in a sense limitless moments in his experience that show an intelligence beyond one that is temporal. Because once the temporal is observed, your nature of being is tapped into a state of consciousness where it's dynamic. So you're no longer an individual body, but you are a multidimensional association of existence regardless of form. And so you are able then capably present it with formats based on how the story is molded. So Mr. Within here is simply to show you that he's a mirror of existence, because he's telling you it is from your simplicity that you can step into your most complex realms. And have you studied your simplicity? Have you seen the chaos that is within your order? Because there are senses of madness for people in our culture and society when they see someone suddenly behave from an association of their age younger than they have to. And when they see that, there's this curiosity. But when you see that the way kids are being born nowadays is trying to be the greatest lesson for their parents, is that humanity is learning that it needs to begin acknowledging life more than just the human form. So the human form must be seen to evolve. So we must see that even though we acknowledge the evolution of the ape, the way we're defining our philosophies and our psychologies is not an ape, it's based on a box. It's based on a box. We don't want, why are we taking into consideration the essence, the inspiration that was evolving the ape was always the unknown factor pulling it. And so the unknown factor is not something you ignore and just say, I want to know from the known factors. That means you're not looking at some rooms of the house which you want to buy. So it's like going somewhere and you just go step into the museum and you're like, I say I'm in the museum, so I'm in the museum. Do you know I've seen the whole museum? No. You need to get engaged. Some experiences need to be experienced, and you will see that you will remember yourself in the eyes of other senses of your own conception through different conceptions and considerations of space and time only when you have become the action. So the way many people seek past lives and future lives is that at first it's an idea, then they get some profound experience, then they feel they are that. But to truly know if you are functioning from another association and conception and dimension of reality is when you will see that you are not bothered by ideas, but you are a very clear knowing. So in other words, when you walk throughout your day, you don't have thoughts engage you the same way because you are acknowledging yourself existentially differently. And when you do that, the flows change. There's no longer luck, but abundance because your presence is open to receive. In other words, a man who is open to love will eventually get a hug. And it will be a good hug. So it is very crucial to know that our sense of self-communication, our sense of self-observance gives us the potential of acknowledging simultaneous realities, which are in a sense movements between how we are associating with the forms of this life as a reference point compared to how these forms can be observed as if like order is always being observed by chaos in that sense. And so with that playfulness, you will see that you are always your greater knowing. You are always your greater knowing. So your 5-year-old self is always had the potential of being who you are now. And so because of the nature of reality being present in this way, you can see that when you find Mr. Within really has found himself. And in that core moment of names being in a sense observed to be hollow, the nameless stands up in such a graceful way. And you will see new mountains of reality, just in a sense, open up to you. Mountains which you must climb to engage. Because there have been many sages, and there has been a Sufi poet which he said a very profound quote. Work in the invisible world at least as hard as you do in the visible. This is a quote by a human being, a very mystical and, in a sense, a self-aware human being about 700, 800 years ago. This is simply his quote. This is what this man said. Now, it is very important because this man was very wise in how he spoke. And so the reason he has said this quote is that you will see that in reality, for example, you see the person who gets involved in that reality suddenly gets more of that. And so there is the interest in the law of attraction. right? But similarly, you will see that when you begin acknowledging first yourself as the emptiness and the clarity within the present moment, then the appreciation of whatever else that is in your observance. In other words, once you're aware of the observer first, then the object of observance, you will see that there are many more objects of observance in your subtler planes of reality. And so these are like mountains. In other words, you have to climb it if you want to go through the experience. So what that means is that man will reach points of transparent view where on that terrace he will see many options, many pathways which he can then walk in. But these pathways, even though they're more abstract observances of physical reality, are all leading to an existential confrontation, because you cannot leave this dimension without an existential confrontation that makes you let go of all that you have with the compassion that you're receiving all that you know or all that you've seen. So what that means is that the way that simply the natural transition of this dimension occurs as you amplify, as you transcend, you see that how it occurs is that you leave by, in a sense, not leaving. So the minute you're comfortable with all reality being as it is, as if you were a moment of stillness in this moving world, in this moving and expanding reality, then you would immediately see that you have an ability to also be all that movement. And so in that observance and experience of both, you can see yourself to be the natural movement into a new dimension of experience. So what that means is man has many routes, and so man has created many ladders. And I'm not here to talk about what's the best ladder, which ladder to use. All ladders are helpful if you know how to use your hands. Now, in regards to subtler dimensions, because I'm talking about how reality is being kept, and so the theme is the kindness of invisible hands, these invisible hands are actually your greater knowing. So what that means is that this reality that we're seeing, the hologram, is a self-communication. So for example, when you say your name, for example, when I say Mr.Within and it's a sound and it comes across as a word, that word is not me, so I know a difference. But internally in our subtler realms, we do not understand this. So for example, a thought feels as if it's inside another thought, and so you think there's a world inside your head. Well, actually, how it is that you have been carved in a way to see life in a way, which then once you acknowledge the whole spectrum, you will no longer be in your own way of getting to the destination of the way you're headed. We need men who are mindful, and so when they plant seeds, they recognize the distance that is required for their proper growth. And you need to have an understanding of yourself and its many aspects and dimensions in a very selfless and compassionate manner. So for example, if you have been someone who has had a hammer in your whole life, and that hammer could be your ego, who you've thought you've been your whole life, and you've been using that hammer to fight back life's oppositions, and how you have to survive and be the fittest. One moment will arise after you have broken many things. You will realize, if I had let go of the hammer, I would never be in a condition where I would be someone who is breaking other people's realities, for example. I'm harming others, you know. Nothing happens to the essence of you when your physicality goes into fluctuation. But what really actually needs to be taken care of is that there's no need for it to go to fluctuation. So it's like you can punch a wall, but there is no need. So stop harming other human beings. Do not try to bother life, because there's a greater collective intelligence that is, in a sense, allowing your individuality to flow. So what that means is that just like how you look, for example, at a flower and the flower is kept there by your vision, similarly, we are kept here by a greater vision of our own greater being. People have called it spirit, soul, higher self, collective intelligence, light body, whatever you want to call it. What it is, in essence, is your knowing, and it's trust and manifestation. So do not take an experimental approach from your externality. Take an internal approach and see that as you observe your thought in your stillest and most silent and most existentially allowing and comfortable moment, you will see that you have granted yourself the ability to observe your own greater ability. And your own greater ability is your own ability to recognize as an idea that your idea can become a much more collective idea, integrated ideas. Because ideas have minds of their own as well. And you will see that you need to lead ideas, not just man. So what that means is that you do acknowledge yourself as an idea, and you need to have that stability, because that is how you can be playful with thought. And so terminology is actually one of man's greatest resources for information. So in other words, the language you use every day, the language that has been used, the histories, regardless of their accuracy, all the words written, all the abstractions found on paper were actually a very beautiful evolution of what is naturally in the tree being communicated on the page for another being to become greater, more self-aware. So what that means is, if we are valuing the universe and putting our own interpretation of what reality is, we should not then take action on our sense of wrong. So what that means is that if I recognize I'm in a reality where it's multidimensional, where for example, I'm having an experience of a present moment, then another being is having another experience of a present moment, when we engage and communicate, existential tolerance is required. The greatest thing that has kept civilization alive and on any planet has been existential tolerance between the species. Existential allowance. You must let yourself see that you are an energetic presence, and so energy is not greedy in its elusive conception that it is a self lost in its world. When it creates its own falsity. So your truth is your ability to break your own world and to see what is beyond it. You are a clarity beyond thought. And so what is existence then? And in that confrontation, this is my experience of course, you go through a moment where senses of self destruct because you see that they were never there. You will see that the way you're acknowledging your memory, it's as if it's not like that. It's as if the eagle's vision, the white eagle's vision from the branch was much different from the from the clouds. You know, there was a difference there. There was a difference in reality. There was a sensitivity in how the texture of things were made. And so you will see that your breathing is always suggesting that sensitivity. So the mindful man, or in a sense, the mindful man, the pilot of consciousness, the one who wants to be aware of their reality and immediately be a multidimensional self-awareness and in a sense movement, so a greater explorer of reality and a more advanced communicator, you will see that the most important thing is to always be in the presence of the kindness to continue. So I will see that throughout my life, there were times where I was thrown into a victim mentality because I did not put the amount of effort to get out of that mentality. Sometimes ideas are just thrown on us and we just forget that they're on. So in other words, you're like wearing your shirt for when you were very young and you're like, why does it feel so tight? Why does life feel so hard? Well, of course, you're associating with an idea like that. So in my whole life, not my whole life, but the beginning of it, there was the association that I had of who I was began to crack the minute I became aware of the temporal nature of reality. When you become aware of the temporal nature of reality, you get a comfort. You're like, oh, I'm gonna die. Dina too, I'm gonna die too. You know, it's like we have this funny dilemma in how immortality is communicated in the media. Just a quick note on this, is that you see, because man is seeking a comfortable answer for man, he will never see his truth. Because his truth is not a comfortable answer. His truth is his transcendence beyond his dimension. It is never a comfortable answer. It is when the order and the chaos are confronted to see what there is next. And so immortality, you will see if everyone is dying and that's the sense of comfort, so if many generations of your family have died and been peaceful in their grave or something, suddenly if people stop dying and they found this technology to like make you never die, you'd be like, no, I want to die too. Because you see, the mental idea of you is driving your external reality. And what that really means is that it's not really the internal. The mental idea of you. I would like to very quickly say, immortality is not an excuse. You are not seeking infinity or to be eternal because you're afraid that you're gonna die. If you're afraid of you're gonna die, that's a game you're playing with yourself. Immediately step out of the game by being the awareness that the player is a player as long as you're in the game. If you're on the field, you're playing the game. You know, if you're on the battlefield, of course there's gonna be bullets. So do not ask reality to change when you know that you need to get up and in a sense look at your might and see who you really are. Because there was a moment that I thought I was the weakest man on this planet because I was thinking I was the weakest man. But I saw that what was perhaps the intensity in our many great leaders and how they walked was that they knew that they did not know, but they knew that they would know. Do you see? And they would continue through that. And so that knowing that you are always kept and that your individuality has nowhere to go but into its collective association, into its collective appreciation, you are not caught in any web of lies when you allow yourself to be clear. Immediately, instantly, without a sense of delay, because there is no delay, it's just now. I hope this episode has served you. It's very important to know that you're always carried by a greater sense of love. I thought this was fluffy at first when I read it in, ancient texts and, very, sacred hymns and poetry and whatnot. But I noticed that what it really is that it says love is simply the experience that you will be integrated with all that there is to love. So you will see that man has an ability now to confront greater realities of what he thought was the greatest reality. So man is always evolving in many fields, so you can never be really caught in your ideas the minute you know where you are, the minute you know the present that is really your true present. And remember, many people have an excitement to pick things up and to grab things. And you should see that you should also have the same excitement to let them go. And you will see that that excitement, the reason that it has to be the same, because it is the excitement of your moment and whatever that is, in a sense, present or that enters your awareness. Know yourself and know that it is important to work in the invisible world at least as hard as you do in the visible. Because reality is found in the moment. And if you still have associations that are making it separate, not that it has to be separate, but just that if you are making something, you will see that it's as if an elusive sense of self is trying to find the freedom when it can just be its greater sense of self. So in other words, remembered yourself than to then see you never needed to remember. You know, you were always there. Much blessings and namaste.